Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Washington Humanitarian Forum. My name is Mvemba Pezo Dizolele. I'm the Senior Fellow and Director of the Africa Program here at the Center. We are excited to be able to share with you in the discussion on redefining trust in aid in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC has been at the front pages, on the front pages and the front lines, and at the intersection of conflict, peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, and development. Recently, with the resurgence of the M23 rebel movement in North Kivu, we've seen that these issues that are relevant to this space have come back to the fore. The United Nations have a large, if not the largest, peacekeeping mission in the DRC. That mission has run into trouble over and over again, particularly because the civilian populations in the region feel that they have been underperforming. And this is a problem because it raises a number of questions. Is the mission adequate? Is the paradigm the right paradigm that we need for this kind of situations? Recently, the Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez, speaking to a French TV station, had considered that the M23 was better equipped than the UN peacekeeping forces in the DRC. That raises a number of questions. How can a rebel movement be better equipped than the force that represents the entire world? Who's arming them? Rwanda said they're not arming them. Uganda said no. UN experts, the group of UN experts report said Rwanda is arming them. If Rwanda is arming them, then there's a problem because Rwanda is a troop contributing country and is very proud of its record in contributing troops. Be that as it may, it raises another question. Where is the Congolese army? Why is it that a country as rich as the DRC has been unable to protect its own civilians? As far as the civilians are concerned, it doesn't make any difference. If you are not being protected, you're not being protected. If you are being protected, it doesn't matter who's protecting you. Anybody who protects you is your friend. But as we know, the DRC now has close to 6 million internally displaced people. It's about 10% of the world, the population of internally displaced people in the world. That is unacceptable. That intersection there has created a big gap, a trust deficit, I'll call it, between the UN. We've seen civilian population protest and riot. We saw this up north when they protested and burned down the Ebola treatment center. We saw it recently again when they literally came head-to-head with UN peacekeepers, and this latter actually opened fire on the civilian population. Where does this leave us? If you are working in the development space, if you're working in humanitarian space, and you're dealing with a population that doesn't trust you, how do you cope with that situation? So these are some of the questions that we'll be answering today. We will be joined by a great panel. I'm going to introduce them. First, we have Dr. Joseph Sani, who is the Vice President of the Africa Center at the United States Institute of Peace. Dr. Sani has over 20 years of experience working at the forefront of peace building with civil society, government, businesses, and international organizations, as well as moderating high-level multi-stakeholder policy and collaborative action at the national level across the continent. The second speaker is Abraham Leno, who is the Executive Director of the Eastern Congo Initiative. As a humanitarian leader, Abraham has led humanitarian efforts in Liberia, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Balochistan in Pakistan, and now the Democratic Republic of Congo. We also joined online by Annie Modi, who is the Executive Director of Afya Mama. It's an organization that deals with women's health. She's committed, the organization is committed to the reproductive health and access to justice for women, as well as leadership development and economic empowerment, legal assistance, and social development of young women in DRC. And finally, it's Vianney Bissimwa. Vianney is also joining us online. He's the regional director of CIVIC, Sahel program. Prior to joining CIVIC, he served as country director in Mali and head of Goma and Kinshasa offices in the Democratic Republic of Congo with Search for Common Ground. You have their bios on your online and also on the document that you received. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panel, starting with Dr. Sani, then we go to you, Mr. Leno, and then Annie Modi, and then Vianney. Please.
All right. Well, I can, yeah. All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Vemba, for inviting us here, and we thank you for your time as well as an audience and around the world. I think Vemba has laid a foundation for what a complex issue we're trying to address here, trust. I mean, we all, it's something that we work in our own relationships, in our own families, and now you tie Congo to it, and you tie humanitarian aid and all the conflict issues that are associated with assessing this. So I will start with a disclaimer. 5 minutes of a conversation is never going to be enough, not even an hour and a half, to be able to delve into the complexity of what the Congo conflict, what the humanitarian situation, nor the issues of how we should build trust around MONUSCU. But probably with these few minutes that we have together, we can instigate a conversation that will try to address some of the issues. And I will be speaking from an angle of a person that has lived in Congo for over 10 years in Eastern Congo in Goma. I actually went to Congo. So I'll start by a story. I went to Congo the day M23, which is a rebel movement now that is also terrorizing Congo, was living for the first time. That was 10 years ago. They were leaving Goma, and I went into Congo. So what I wanted to do was build a social enterprise, and so I wanted to work in healthcare and wanted to accelerate how fast we can deploy healthcare facilities. So I went in with the notion of, I want to build healthcare facilities, and in order to cut cost and time, I decided to bring in prefabricated models of clinics that were developed outside of Congo and tried to import them. So, long story short, I brought in the first one with my team and deployed it in a place around Bukavu. The community, as welcoming as we all know, the Congolese community, came in celebrating and dances, and everyone was singing. But there was also a very huge concern in their face, and I saw a very concerning environment. So the elders of the community came to me and said, "We want to talk to you, Abraham." I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And they said, "When are you taking the container away?" Yes, I was as shocked as you are. And like, in the middle of a lunch, in the middle of a dance, why are you asking me when I'm taking the container away? So they said, "Well, we have seen these containers come and they go." So for them, they have seen these prefabricated models of containers that the UN peacekeeping missions deploy. But then, as often as they come in, they also move them, and sometimes unknown to the communities, the containers disappear, and everybody, so their hopes are dashed. This was the concern that they had, that they were bringing to me and saying, "When are you taking the containers away?" So, what did that teach me at that time? That building trust was going to require an active listening and active adaptation of whatever I had planned or whatever I had thought. Not an assumption or checking a box. So, as a humanitarian, my context is in humanitarian development. I was a refugee for 11 years and lived in refugee camps. So, that's the story that brings me to Congo as well. I want to look at how the common person, the everyday person, views Congo in contrast to how they view a traditional humanitarian organization. So allow me, and please, the analysis here are not a critique. They are just to give us a snapshot or a context to how, and my conversations with the actual folks, right? So they get the credit and I get the blame, if there's any blame to take. All right. In Congo, the NGO to a community person is a known actor. It's a known actor. And by known actor, I mean the humanitarian space goes in with an assessment. You approach the community, you talk to them, you set objectives and plans, what you want to achieve. There is a dialogue, there is a conversation, you start to build an ownership. The MONUSCO is an unknown actor. Okay? They see either the UN trucks or crossing the border, and they choose a location where the camp is going to be stationed, and paf, there's a camp, a UN camp. And then you see people with guns going around, and you have no idea what they are doing. So that's one area, known actor versus, an actor that we don't know who these people are. And the second aspect of the analysis is the tangibles. There is an impact that is visible, that is practical, that comes in with a humanitarian actor in place. If you come in to provide water, if you have assessed that there are water needs, there is a healthcare need, you provide those services and you work along with communities. And on the other hand, it's really a very big question. If you talk to the mama, if you talk to a young person who looks at MONUSCO and sees only the fence and the guys coming in with the white vehicles and a gun, and you ask them, what does the MONUSCO do? They will ask you, what are they doing here? Especially that in the space where that communication has not been very plain, very upfront, and very transparent, the community sets the expectation that these guys with the gun will protect me. And when they don't see that, when they don't get that physical protection, there is a mismatch misalignment in the expectations that are set. Both UNs and the humanitarian actors, the UN peacekeeping mission and the humanitarian actors are viewed as disruptors. Okay, that is the truth. We're disruptors. We disrupt local businesses. There's disruption in how the lifestyle, but there is a lot more on the humanitarian side, which is why you find today that the attacks are more on the UN side and really not on the humanitarians, because that disruption comes with some information and level of empathy, compromise, because of the consistent communication and conversation that the NGOs or the humanitarian actors have. The UNs don't have that. They are all seen as economic. They have brought in economic incentives, so they provide employment. UN peacekeeping mission is one of the biggest employers, similar to NGOs. But here is what happens. These folks that are employed with the humanitarian actors, they have benefits, they have some social services that come with those, and the services that are provided are geared towards a sustainable end, right? So that job is not just a job today, but it's a job that is probably secured for the next couple of years. The UN guys that employ a lot of people, but when they leave, that's it. So people are not prepared for when that departure happens, and that disruption causes a lot of questioning. So these are some of the issues that we see today within the community. And a major part that I also see in the conversations with the community is the mandate. The NGO, the humanitarian actors are able to spread out and share a conversation around their mandate, but the communities don't know what is the mandate of the UN. And so humanitarian actors speak out when there is a humanitarian action. When people in Beni are hacked to death, many times over the past 10 years that I have been there, you have humanitarian actors that speak up, but most times the UN peacekeeping mission is quiet. So people are asking, whose side are you on? And that's a question, that's a voice that the Congolese people really want to have, They just want to talk. They want to know if they are owners in these conversations around their well-being, around their safety and their security, and or if they are not. So some of the riots that we're seeing is really, I'm not condoning any riot, but there is a question to be answered, and I think we are here to answer in a few minutes to try.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Abraham. Sani.
Yes. Thank you, Wemba. Thank you for inviting us here and for having this conversation. This is timely and relevant given the situation on the ground. I will just pick up where you left, my friend. I think I will take one step back to say trust also comes from your performance and your engagement with people. Right? So what you have mentioned, there is a lack of communication, and then sometimes lack of performance, and sometimes MONUSCO is involved in some kind of abuses. But there is also the dimension of local ownership, right? So it's not just a local ownership of the solutions, that maybe MONUSCO is bringing some solutions that people cannot own or don't know what it is, but there's also the ownership of the problem. And it struck me every time I look at or I read about the DRC or listen to, I don't have a sense that there is an ownership of the problem by the leadership of the DRC itself. Let's be frank. When I say leadership, it's not just the political leadership, but also civil society, even the army as well. As we know, if you don't have that local ownership, it's very difficult to be trusted as well. So the MONUSCO is partnering with the least trusted actors in the country. So therefore, I don't think it builds up the trust the citizen will have. So there is a question of who are you working with, not who are you working for. And it seems that the engagement with the leadership of the country also has a problem of trust. Citizens are not trusting their leaders. So that aspect, combined to the performance of the MONUSCO, continue to increase that gap of trust between citizens and MONUSCO. So you have to deal with the performance, but also deal with the type of leadership and partnership that the MONUSCO is building, particularly the leadership of the country. The other aspect we may want to consider is I joined this field of peace building through one of our mentors, Hal Sanders. Some of you in the room may know him. He wrote a book on sustained dialogue. And he used to tell me, Sani, you know, leaders sign peace treaties, but only people make peace. And in the DRC, it seems to me that people, the citizens, have been excluded from the process of making peace. Many peace deals were signed. And as we speak, we have very comprehensive and detail-oriented mechanism for tracking peace. We have the oversight mechanism. We have the peace security cooperation framework for DRC. And we have the 18 benchmarks and the transition plan. Those plans are great on paper, but they don't reflect or do not recognize the importance of citizens in making them a reality. So we may sit in Kenya or Nairobi or in Kigali and discuss, and even in New York and shake hands as we have seen. But if people are not involved in making those plans a reality, if they are not involved in defining solutions, implementing solutions, I think we have a problem. It will not happen. And that will not build trust. And we know for a fact that the civil society in DRC, particularly in Eastern Congo, is very vibrant, very engaged. The humanitarian sector is quite engaged. But if we cannot leverage that engagement, leverage the social assets that they can bring to work towards resolving this conflict, it will be very difficult. We will be back here 10 years from now. But that also makes me wonder, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So people know that. They know that we have to, people sign peace, leaders sign peace treaties, but people make peace. But why are we not making it? So when you look, and that brings me to look at the nature of the conflict in DRC. And that goes back to your question. Are we in the right paradigm? Is MONUSCO the right instrument? Because the MONUSCO is part of the tradition of peacekeeping missions with particular template, etc. But the conflict in DRC has evolved. The incentive structure has changed. It seems to me that the wolf is in the barn. There is more incentive to prolong the conflict than there are to resolve the conflict. That's very grave, but it's a fact. Today, a member of the DRC military force, the DRC, makes more money being in the front line than his annual salary, sometimes 10 times. Right? Generals are making millions compared to their normal salary. So, honestly, if I'm making millions of dollars on something, why will I stop it? Why? So there is a perversive incentive structure to prolong the conflict than to resolve it. And the third thing I would like to say, the other thing I would like to add in this conversation, because we can't, for me, I don't think we will find answer, but we have to raise the brutal questions facing us. I traveled to DRC, and the conflict, it's like we have multiple Congos. People in Kinshasa can spend their time having the Ndombolo, and they will say in the East, ils aiment la guerre. Ça, c'est la culture de la guerre. It's like we are talking, imagine a country where you have 5.3 million IDPs. IDP is a fancy word, by the way. It means 5.3 million people have left their homes, abandoned, because they are running away. 5.3 million people who were active, productive citizens now are beggars. 5.3 million people who were bosses, had their farms, are beggars. They don't produce anything anymore. 5.3 million people in a given country, but nobody gives a damn. It's like, ils aiment la guerre. They love war. It's a part of their culture. There is no national outreach, no national mobilization to say, this has to stop. Let's find a national conference. Let's do something so that we can contribute to it. So, but it boils down to the pervasive incentive structure of this war. So, yeah, we may talk trust, we may blame MONUSCO and everybody all day long, but there are real elephants in the room that we have to address if we need to start rebuilding the trust and hopefully resolve this conflict. I will stop that. I think I raised a couple of controversial points, but I think they are worth discussing frankly.
All right. Thank you, Sani. That's an understatement. It's also interesting because the DRC being that big, the DRC is the size of Western Europe. So we're talking a big country here. It's the only African country with 2 time zones. That's how big we're talking. So when we have this protracted conflict in the east of the country with a class of citizens making a lot of money out of it, at one point, it's either people rise up to ask the leaders to deliver, end of story, or at one point, it becomes a problem for the citizen as well in other part of the country, because for a long time they've been told, we're not building much because the money is being invested for the war effort. So after 20 years, this war effort, if you're sitting in Mbandaka, you never see the war end, and you never see development. So at one point, it's asking too much of the citizens to continue thinking of the war, because they've been told for 20 years that the reason we're not building here because we're investing in the war effort. So I think there's those dynamics that are also important. Not that people don't care in those spaces, but like we're tired of hearing about this war. What have we not done? I mean, if you have no hospital in Basankusu or in Loja, but yet you have a tremendous presence of NGOs in the East, to the point you often meet experts who say, I like the East better. That's another, we are familiar with this. Do you want to be in Goma or do you want to be in Bandaka? It's like, no, I want to be in Goma. But then there's M23 in the mountains. It's like, there's all these dichotomies about the situation. We'll turn to our friend Ani Modi